Welcome back to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I am your guest host now, Savannah.
And I'm Diana.
And we are super excited to be joined by this extremely special guest who I've wanted on the podcast for a very, very long time. She is a writer, an author, and the founder of the Feminist Current website, the lovely Meghan Murphy. Hi, Meghan.
Hi, Meghan.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm such a fan of the podcast. I feel like you guys say things that no one else says, and it's always thrilling to hear. So I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. We are so glad to have you. And, Meghan has done some amazing work for women and across feminism as well. And what I've really liked is almost your feminist journey as well, which has been quite public. So I guess before we get into the main episode, do you mind just telling us a bit more about yourself and I suppose your journey with feminism? Because I think that will segue quite nicely into the topic that we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been a feminist for as long as I can remember. Like, I remember being a little kid, being 10 years old and in elementary school and up in arms about sexism and storming off to the principal's office to complain about it. And, it's something, my mother was a feminist, so I feel like I always noticed social dynamics between boys and girls. And as I advanced and became a young woman, I came of age during really almost peak third wave feminism, I suppose, in the late 90s. And so when I started having sex, it was the rise of hookup culture. And, we learned as young women during that time, and I think now as well, maybe even more so now, that we could have sex just like boys. And, that it was empowering to be promiscuous, that, it was sort of good to push away your feelings and not get attached. So I think I sort of attempted that for a little while. Like, I thought, those guys are players. I can be like that. I can be a player. But, it didn't work. Like, I was always getting attached and I was always getting hurt feelings and I was always being disrespected. And I discovered radical feminism around then. It was also during that time that we were hearing about things like feminist pornography and the idea that so-called sex workers, this is not a term that I use, making empowered choices, and that actually pornography was for women too. And if you were a really open-minded, sexual, liberated woman, you would enjoy pornography, and, prostitution was kind of like a cool, edgy thing to do. And none of it sat right for me ever. I tried a bit, like I would go to the strip club with my friends, female and male friends, actually. I had female friends who had, their birthday party at a strip club, and I just felt so disgusting.
Is that a thing?
This was, 1999 or 1998,
Okay.
So I don't know if it's still a thing, but, women do go to strip clubs now, and they seem to, or they claim to enjoy it. And every time I was at a strip club, I just was like, this is the most depressing place in the world. And I always just felt so gross about it. And same thing with pornography. Like, I remember my first boyfriend who I was living with, I found pornography on the computer and I was so upset and so nauseated, but I couldn't really articulate why. And to be honest, I don't think women really have to articulate why. I think that having an innate reaction to that kind of thing is good enough and natural. But I did also at that time discover radical feminism. I discovered Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon and Sheila Jeffries. And, and I read Ariel Levy's Female Chauvinist Pigs. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. My reaction to all of this makes sense. There's a reason why. And actually, this was wrong. And from there, I became me. So, I did a degree. I did a BA and a master's degree, actually, in women's studies. Although while I was completing the degree, the department changed its name to gender, sexuality, and women's studies. And I was always like the only one in the class who thought that prostitution was exploitative and not good for women, and that thought that the idea of feminist pornography was ridiculous.
I completely feel your pain there, because like gender / like feminism classes at uni are just such a sorry state of affairs. That I remember when I was at uni, the chair of the feminist society was a man. And it's like there were men on the committee, and it was just so horrific. So I completely feel your pain there, because it's just proper like liberal feminism brainwashed.
Yeah, I mean, and it had all become really theory at that point. We weren't learning much about first wave feminism or women's history or even really much of second wave feminism. It was all these sort of modern academic third wave theorists. But yeah, I guess when I started writing, like I started blogging, I started doing feminist radio with a feminist collective, fell apart, of course, as they all do. And podcasting, I was sort of like one of the only ones. You know, I was always at odds with all the sort of mainstream feminists, all the leftists, you know, all the Jessica Valenti's and Jill Flipoviches of the world and Amanda Marcotte and all those people. I don't know who's listening or remembers all those people back from the, like, I don't know, 2011s or whatever it was.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I was critical of BDSM, and that was like a big no-no. You weren't allowed to be critical of anything that was counted as sexual, really, and I was. So I was always difficult and controversial. And then, of course, the whole gender identity thing came along, and that was really it for me.
I don't know like when that started taking over, but like, do you recall at like what point this started becoming more common? Because you did mention that the program was changed while you were still there. Because when I was in college, like, I don't know whether I was like living in a cave or something, but like it seemed to have blown up like in the mid 2010s. I don't know if I'm correct in assessing that.
Yeah, definitely. When I was in university, when I was doing my BA, it didn't exist in as far as conversation or topics. And when I was doing my master's degree, it came up a little bit, but it wasn't really that controversial, and it was not a major topic of conversation. But I do recall, you know, the reason why I first started speaking out about it was because I was, you know, working with Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter in Vancouver, and a lot of those women, you know, I was connected, I was allied with them is the word that we would have used at that time. And they were constantly being attacked as transphobic because they'd had this years-long case that they were forced to fight at the Human Rights Tribunal in Canada because a man named Kimberly Nixon had shown up at one of their training sessions for counselors, so for female counselors who would be working in the transition house and shelter with the women or answering the rape crisis line. It was women only who were part of the collective. It was women only who could be in the house and answer the line. And of course, women only in the shelter and transition house for obvious reason. You know, these are women who were escaping really serious male violence. So of course you wouldn't want men around in those circumstances, and men don't understand what that experience is like, no matter how many times you explain it to them. They just don't. They can't. I don't think they understand that feeling of vulnerability in the same way women do. But so he showed up, and they realized that he was a man because he's male, and you can tell. And pretend like you can. And they said, sorry, you know, this training is only for women, not men. And he sued them. You know, he cares so much about helping women suffering male violence or escaping domestic violence or, you know, coping with the aftermath of rape or whatever, that he decided to try to destroy one of the few places in Canada that helps those women. So they were forced to go through this years long case, and they finally won.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, but they, you know, ever since they were tarred as transphobic by the Vancouver lefties, and I was defensive of them. And so I started to try to figure out how to articulate arguments around, you know, why women-only space is important. And that was around 2012 that I started talking about those things. And I think it was 2015 that everything really blew up. And all of a sudden it was like we were hearing language like menstruators and pregnant people and trans women are women. And then, of course, gender identity legislation was introduced in Canada as well as in America and in the UK. That all kind of happened all at once. And so at that point, that became my focus because I saw right away how dangerous and fucked up it was. And again, I was, one of the only people, certainly one of the only women and feminists in Canada who was at the time on the left. I don't identify as a leftist anymore, but who was talking about this stuff publicly. And, I was fighting to be published, which was next to impossible. And I became an easy target, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's quite the history with, feminism as well. And as I've said before, because I started following you, I think around 2018 when all that trans stuff was really kicking off for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really great just like seeing, because again, back then it was quite rare to have somebody, actually speak up against it and try to protect women's rights. And you had people like Magdalene Burns as well, R.I.P.
Mm-hmm.
I was really sad when she passed away, who was also part of that voice as well. So that was probably the first time I came across a substantive amount of your work too. I feel like every feminist in the public eye sort of goes through a journey with feminism, especially when you begin to clash with other feminists online over ideology as well. Like yourself, I strongly believe in radical feminism, but I've been, I guess, unofficially kicked out of being a radical feminist by a radical feminist. But never mind, we move.
It happens to all of us.
It happens to everyone, right? And I feel like, what's that saying in Spider-Man, where if you live like long enough, you see yourself, that then you'll become the villain or something. I definitely feel like that ends up happening to outspoken women over a period of time, is that they'll just end up pissing somebody off, with what they're saying.
But it is crazy like how there was such a like ideological capture that happened at that time, because I have to say that I was one of those people who really bought into all of that hook, line, and sinker. And, my whole thing was like, oh, it takes nothing to be kind and everything. And then I remember I had a friend who sat me down and actually spoke to me about it. And she was like, really think it through, right? And I really, really want to thank this friend, because if she hadn't sat me down and I pride myself on being a person who can change my mind when presented with other opinions. And when she, talked about all the situations that were going on in the prisons, and how important it was to have single sex spaces. I remember when I first joined FDS, that was something I noticed as well, that it was an all-female space, and that part of the criticism of FDS from the other groups was that it was transphobic. And so I went out of my way to find this so-called transphobia in the page, which I could never find. But the more I stewed in that messaging and the more I spoke to other people who definitely had other opinions, I was like, yeah, no, this is mass scale ideological capture. And it's affecting government policies and it's affecting academic institutions. It has such a rigid hold. And, I used to love J.K. Rowling. So when they took a hit on her, I was like, okay, now what the hell is going on? They're coming after the children's authors now. This is crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's wild just how fast that became the unofficial law of the land.
Mm-hmm. It happened so fast. It really wasn't a debate pre-2010. And then it just all of a sudden was everywhere, which I think really goes to show how top down it was. This wasn't a grassroots sort of organic movement of activism that rose up to defend the marginalized trans. It came from top down, from governments, from institutions. Of course, corporations glommed on. It's such a powerful ideology, and those who spoke out were probably already marginal and then further marginalized by the media, by their institutions, by the universities, ignored by the politicians, and vilified in the public, banned and censored across the board. In 2018, that's when I was banned from Twitter for 4 years for referring to a male predator, Jonathan Yaniv, the guy who famously was seeking a Brazilian bikini wax from female estheticians in Vancouver. I called him. He was banned from Twitter. And also, my I think I had 3 incriminating tweets. And one of them was literally, the other one was, it's him referring to Jonathan Yaniv. And the other one was asking something along the lines of, what's the difference between a trans woman and a man? I was trying to ask, What point does a man become a trans woman? And what's the difference there? What's happened that he's no longer a man and now he's a woman? And it was so strange. It was like the whole world had gone insane. And those of us who were fighting this, it was almost like, why do we have to do this? This is such a weird distraction. And of course, it's not a distraction because it's everything. I mean, what's a woman's right if there's no such thing as a woman? And, you know, I became a big advocate for free speech during that time, too, because it was really, really clear what could happen if we didn't have free speech and how dangerous that was. And that put me at odds with a lot of the feminists I had been allied with and working with and who'd been supporting me all those years, because unfortunately the truth is that a lot of feminists don't support free speech. So, you know, they support free speech for them, but not for the people that they think are bad, which, you know, defeats the purpose of free speech.
Yeah, and it was like one thing when it was like just the trans movement, but then once they brought in non-binary, I was like, okay, like you just chose to be a woman today. Like, how am I supposed to know? You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like a man today. And it's like, it's weird how in adopting these newfangled labels, they've somehow managed to cement the binary even more. It's like, oh, I am a man because I choose to wear jeans. It's like, when was that ever an indicator of you being a man? Like, how?
And what happened to feminism? You know, like I grew up in this feminism where it was cool to be a tomboy. And when I was a kid, I didn't like girly things. And, you know, some of that hatred of girly things, I think, was sort of like not necessarily a positive outcome of feminism, because I also felt like, you know, motherhood was kind of lame and boring and pathetic. And, you know, anything that was associated with femininity, like I didn't want anything to do with that, because I thought that all of the boys stuff was cooler. But, you know, in a lot of ways, the boys things are cooler. You know, like I wanted to play with the boys and I liked playing with trucks and blocks, and I wanted to be adventurous and speak up and be difficult. And I never, you know, femininity never really felt natural to me. And I often wondered, you know, when I was a teenager, I sort of felt like I was supposed to be performing in this way that I couldn't really master, and that didn't feel comfortable to me. I wasn't good at being passive and coy, and, you know, I always was argumentative and kind of rebellious and difficult. And the clothing thing is, it's like, oh, well, today I feel like wearing, you know, men's jeans and men's, you know, like a flannel or whatever. So maybe I'm a man today. And it's like, I wear men's clothes all the time. I like men's clothes. Like, it doesn't make me a man. Ridiculous.
And the gender police would probably think you're a man now.
Yeah.
With all the shit that you said, you're like, you probably are a man, Meghan. Maybe you don't know.
I know. I joke about that. I'm like, because I'm a man on the inside, because I often, you know, I do feel, I guess if I had to call it something, I do feel kind of more masculine than a lot of women. And I've never desired traditional femininity. Like, I've never wanted to be a mother and a wife, or, you know, I've never been particularly nurturing. I've never been particularly nice. And I get along with men, and I'm vulgar, and I like to, you know, yell and burp and swear in bars and things like that. You know, it's like, maybe I am a man on the inside. You know, if I had been born a decade or two later, then who knows what would have happened. You know, I don't think that my parents would have gone along with that nonsense, but I can see that being appealing to me when I was young, for sure, because I sort of wanted that. You know, I remember teaching myself how to pee standing up, but it didn't make me think I was a boy. I just was like, oh, that seems cool. I want to do that.
And I think that all this essentially ties in quite nicely to what feminism has, or the mainstream feminism ultimately has become, because what it has unfortunately morphed into is almost like a men's rights movement. And a key aspect of that ideology now is that women can find empowerment and respectability through, you know, through things like casual sex and trying to approach sex in the same way that men do. I think one of the biggest mistakes that liberal feminism made, they made a lot of good strides in terms of egalities alongside the radical feminists and, you know, getting, you know, women equal rights in law. But at the same time, what they failed to caveat was the fact that men and women are not the same, both, you know, also in terms of biology, and also in terms of the way society treats and perceives men and women. And I feel like the approach to casual sex is a really, really good example of that, of those differences.
I do just want to add, though, that, like, you know, as much as we're saying that things kind of got to a fever pitch in 2015, I feel like liberal feminism was priming for this casual sex thing since like as early as the early 2000s. Because I remember like Sex in the City and like these episodes about having sex like men and like having sex without feeling and just kind of normalizing casual sex in a way. And I feel like, I mean, at that time it was probably considered radical, but like in hindsight, I feel like they also just caused a lot of destruction because they normalized extremely terrible situationships and like just a lot of disrespect for women. And I think a lot of women normalize that as like, oh, these are normal parts of relationship. Like, yeah, you're supposed to be in this situationship with this guy who's like much richer and older than you and like spend 7 seasons or whatever just like chasing after him. And yeah, you should date like this homosexual guy who doesn't, you know, do anything for you and doesn't add any value to your life. And yeah, you should like have sex like a man and not worry about chlamydia or syphilis or whatever. And like, you know, the logical, practical aspects of that were just taken away. And like, if you criticize that and said, hey, actually, it's kind of dangerous for women to be this foolish about their sexual choices, you would just get like this whole, like the book slammed on you. You know what I mean? Like, you're a prudish bitch. How dare you? It's my body, my choice, and all this other shit. And like, you know, you couldn't have a sensible discussion with people.
No, I mean, it was also fake and forced too, you know, I mean, and I can say this because I feel like I went through it myself. It's not just a judgment of other women, you know, which I think it's fine to judge other women. I think it's fine to judge anybody. We do that inherently as human beings. I don't know when judgment became a bad thing.
I know, right?
Like, you're judging people all the time. Like, what are you just walking around the world with your eyes closed and your brain shut? Like, what are you talking about?
And it's always the people that say you shouldn't be judging me, like you shouldn't judge my choices, who are judging you for disagreeing with them. So it's like you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, it was women were trying to all this like forcing yourself to pretend that you enjoy pornography and BDSM. Like, you enjoy being hurt in the bedroom and degraded and called all these horrible names. Like, I don't believe you. And maybe it can feel exciting in the moment, but the idea that that's empowering in the long term or that's the way that you should be treated by a man is so clearly wrong. And I remember I would have friends and they'd be like, oh yeah, no, I really enjoy anal sex. I'm like, what do you enjoy about it? Like, you enjoy being a man's pornographic fantasy, but you know, you don't have a prostate, so you're not having sex from having anal sex. Like, that's not what your butt is built for. Stop lying. And you don't have to do these things to get men to like you or to want you or to find a relationship. It's always hilarious to think about this idea that women think, oh, I need to do this to get a guy. I need to send nudes to get a guy. I need to pretend to like porn or pretend to like anal sex or whatever. And it's like, men are not picky. Like, it's not that hard to get a man to date you.
And actually, because I used to be quite active within the BDSM community, and what was super interesting was the prevalence of the Madonna whore complex. So what that was is that the doms, they were usually male. You know, they'd be able to slap, beat up, abuse a woman, you know, who was just a sub. But at the same time, when I would then ask them, okay, like, have you ever been in a romantic relationship with a submissive or a woman who identified as submissive? And all of them said no. And so it was sort of then that the penny dropped for me. So it's like, I thought that this was something that was intrinsic, so to speak, to these doms, that they needed BDSM, but they don't. And they're very selective about the women that they abuse. So the women that they purport to love the most, they couldn't ever imagine inflicting something like BDSM on them. It was always the women that they just saw as a casual fling or, you know, just another submissive.
That is interesting. You know, I think that because I grew up in this era, this time in feminism where, and because of radical feminism, I thought that, you know, marriage was bad. I was sort of unconvinced that monogamy was good or necessarily natural. And so I sort of went through this phase of thinking, oh, maybe polyamory is the way to go. But of course, I could never do that. And I was never interested in having more than one relationship at a time anyway, never mind having my partner sleeping with other women. Like, this is what I wrote about in my piece, which is that I never really took sex all that seriously because it seemed like it didn't matter. Because I thought, well, I'm not looking for the father of my children and I'm not looking for a man to marry. So I technically can sleep with whoever I want. And I believed that should have no negative impact. But then, of course, it was emotionally torturous. And then you're left with this idea that maybe there's something wrong with you, because why are you feeling hurt all the time? Why can't you have sex like the boys? And it is in large part because this modern iteration of feminism told us that, and the women around me reinforced that message. And because, yeah, of shows like Sex and the City, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed watching. I've watched those seasons over and over and over. But you know, who's Samantha? Like, who's Samantha in real life? Like, that's a gay man, first of all. Like, this is a show made by gay men who don't understand what it's like to be a woman either. But, you know, Samantha's life was supposed to, I guess, be enviable, but it wasn't. I mean, I certainly was not capable of that. And I don't think most women that I know are capable of that. Just, you know, meeting random guys and having sex with them, like men that you don't even know. Having sex with strangers is such a dangerous, unappealing, unfulfilling thing for a woman to do. You know, that was all just a lie.
Even within the show, like, you can tell that it's coming from a place of insecurity a lot of times. Like, if I were to meet a woman who was having sex as much as Samantha was, I would assume that she's like severely traumatized. Like, that's not, you know, a healthy way of being. And I mean, you could see that in her like intimate relationships, because as much as she had like this false sort of bravado about how strong she was, like in her relationships, she completely let the men walk all over her. Maybe with the exception of like her last one with Smith, but like with the other ones, I mean, with Richard, for example, like, I mean, that guy treated her like shit. He like cheated on her everything and she was totally okay with it, you know? And also the reason why I think that character was sold as like this feminist sort of fantasy was because she has it all, right? She's got money, she's got power, and then she's also got the ability to have sex with like all these like, attractive men. And that's very much a male fantasy. And so for a lot of women, I think that they were also kind of brainwashed into thinking that they could have that for themselves. You know, even in my position, like when I've dated men, when I was younger, especially, I feel like I wasn't nearly as firm about my sexual boundaries just because I was very manipulated by the media in terms of like what I should allow. And I didn't have the vocabulary or the strength that I have now to push back and say, hey, I'm not comfortable doing that. You know, and so much of the media teaches you that you should be pleasing them. Like even in Sex and the City, even with like Cosmo, all these other magazines, the focus is always on please the man, right? Like make sure his sexual fantasies are fulfilled and that you do whatever you can to make him happy. So like your sexual agency is kind of taken away from you, and your ability to define for yourself, like, hey, what feels comfortable to me? What feels healthy to me? Like, do I even want to do this shit? Like, do I even want to have anal sex with this guy? Do I want to sit and watch like, I don't know, strangulation porn with this guy in his bedroom? Like, no, I don't want to do these things. But when you're younger, I think when you're early 20s, it's very hard to say no.
Yeah, and you don't know yourself, so you don't even know if you want it or not. And if you have a bad feeling about it, you're left wondering if you're just not a sexually liberated or sexually empowered woman. But what's really not talked about is the emotional aspect and the fact that, you know, sex isn't just about bodies. It's also about your mind and your emotional self and your spiritual self and all of that stuff. And that's why, in part, when you're in a relationship with a man that you love and you trust, the sex is so much better. And, you know, women are much more likely to have orgasms in committed relationships than, you know, I don't know that any women are honestly having orgasms when they're having one night stands, a few here and there. But, you know, trusting someone and feeling like somebody respects you and loves you and cares about you is a huge part of having good sex. And it's such a male view of sex that sex is just, oh, we're doing this with our genitals and that produces a good feeling. It's not how it works for women. And, you know, men, of course, are going to have better sex and more powerful orgasms in relationships likely too, but they are built to be able to come regardless. Like men can have sex with and have orgasms with women that they don't even like or respect. And I don't really think that's the case for women in large part, and nobody tells you that.
Mm. And also, I feel like even for men, even though, like, I suppose if we say, they're built for casual sex, so to speak, but all the like promiscuous like men that I've come across, they've even also said that the best sex that they've had was when they got to know the person, when they were in a relationship. And so there are a lot of people who are, I suppose, it's essentially lying, not just, to themselves, but to other people, just basically about like how, I guess, fantastic casual sex is. And, just off the back of, what you were saying, Megan, I think, just like how feminism has sort of been like hijacked to become a men's rights movement, I also believe that the sex positivity movement for women has also been like essentially hijacked in the same way. And, sex positivity now, it basically means that you are only sex positive if you are willing to have sex as quickly as possible. When actually, just because you are having sex quickly, that doesn't mean that you're having sex positively, especially if you are having sex in a way that doesn't serve you. And a lot of casual sex just doesn't serve women.
Yeah, I mean, and that whole ideology just seems like the perfect gateway to normalizing prostitution and pornography and self-objectification and, sending nudes and doing OnlyFans and stuff like that. Because why would you need a connection to any of these men? Why would you need to know any of these men? We're all sexually liberated women who can do whatever we want. And if theoretically casual sex is not just fine, but enjoyable and empowering and fun for women, then why not get paid for it? What's the difference? It doesn't mean anything. It's like a completely non-holistic approach to sex, which is strange for a movement. So much of third wave feminism was about anti-rape culture. But, why would rape be a big deal? Why would rape be traumatic if it's just bodies and it's just sex? And of course, the answer is consent, right? So they've simplified everything down to if you consent, then it's all fun and good. And if you don't consent, it's bad, which again, doesn't address the emotional impacts of any of that and, how you feel as a full human being when someone's doing something to you that is degrading or that you don't want, versus being with someone who cares about your well-being and cares about you as a person. It's such a simplistic kind of analysis that is really anti-human in a lot of ways.
Agreed. I feel like society likes to basically oscillate between two extremes, and the current state of things like sex positivity and then the acceptance of casual sex, though I am seeing a lot of pushback now against casual sex. But it's almost like in response to, because I grew up in a very, very religious household where it was basically like, if you had sex before marriage, you're going straight to hell. Like that sort of rhetoric. And things like, BDSM and the casual sex culture, it's almost like it's essentially putting the pendulum in completely the opposite direction when, like you said, humans are a lot more nuanced. It's almost like there's a false dichotomy, right? Because if you protest against BDSM or casual sex, you get told, while you're such a conservative, you're sex negative. And that always makes me chuckle because something like BDSM is probably the most sexually conservative way to have sex. Like, do you think that any religion is going to be anti-BDSM when majority of the major religions teaches that the man is basically the dominant and the woman should be submissive? Do you think any religion is going to look at the dom-sub dynamic and think, oh, that's against, the natural order as we see it? They're going to probably sit there and think, yeah, that's how it should be. But at the same time, then you'll get people saying things like, oh, there's female doms too, but the female doms, they're not regarded the same way as the male doms, and it's not even close. So that's just a red herring.
And I would assume that there'd probably be more male doms than female anyway.
100%, 100%. And we actually had a really brilliant female dom on the podcast sometime last year. And the stories that she was telling me, it was like, like this shit, like no pun intended, would literally not fly with a male dom. And I feel really bad because, these female doms are being exploited in quite a horrific way, but it isn't acknowledged because on the surface it seems like, well, they're a dom too, when it's like, it's just not the same. And the patriarchal, dynamics where, basically the man is the leader, regardless of if he takes a position of sub or dom, and the woman is just basically there to be a kink dispenser, whether she is the sub or the dom, it's still the same thing. And I used to, when I was in the community, I actually used to pity the female doms probably the most out of like the subs and the female. It was just so much more shit they had to wade through. And it would essentially be, the dominance, or so for example, the male dominance, they weren't too much better. But with the male subs, it would almost be like they would be trying to dominate them from the bottom, if that makes sense. But then they wouldn't, essentially the respect or the regard as a dominant, in quotation marks, it wouldn't be there in the same way that a female sub would respect and regard her dominant.
That's interesting. I didn't know any of that. When I think about BDSM, when you think about the women who are tied up in these supposedly sexual ways, you don't think about men, you think about women. Like, you think about the images of like Dita Von Teese and those kinds of like sort of famous BDSM type women, and being tied up and gagged and whipped and things like that. And I know that there's some men who have some version of those fetishes, but I think you're right that primarily what you see is the fetishization of female submission and the abuse of women. It's not a thing where women are choking men in bed, but it's definitely a thing where men are choking women in bed.
Exactly. 100%. Like, you don't...
Like, I've never desired or been asked to choke a man in bed. It's never occurred to me. I don't want to be choked myself either, but the amount of young women, I'm sure you guys hear this as much as I do, who are talking about men choking them in bed, unprovoked or whatever.
I had someone ask me once, and like that was the first time I ever had to think about it, because I didn't know it was so common, and I was like, no, and I kicked him out of my house like almost immediately.
Good.
Because I was scared. Because I was like, is he like, a Freddy Krueger kind of, is he gonna kill me? Like, that was my first thought. I was like, why would you want to strangle someone? What part of this is sexy? Until I realized that they're not really fantasizing about having sex with you. They're fantasizing about being violent with you. They're getting off on being violent with you.
Yeah.
It's not fantasizing about having a sexual connection with you or intimacy with you. It's fantasizing about the chance to beat you and assault you and hurt you. They're getting off like on the fact that they're being violent towards you. And it wasn't until like I got asked that question that I was like, that is a really strange and bizarre thing to ask. Because I'm, obviously not that entrenched in this extremely pornified culture that men are in. But also porn is a big part of this. You know what I mean? Because like, I don't think there's a man around me that doesn't watch porn anymore. Like, I feel like the ones that I know who don't are like very, very few in between. Maybe I can count them on like one hand. And even then, I'm not 100% sure because, you never really know what people do behind closed doors.
Yeah, I know some men who have quit watching porn. I'm sure I don't know any men who've never used porn. And as you say, it's few and far between. And when you say critical things about pornography, most people, women and men, will be shocked, it's sad and revealing that, especially for men and men who are my age, I'm in my 40s now, and they've never heard a woman say, no, I don't want you to use porn, or no, I won't be in a relationship with you if you use pornography. It's all been fine as good as far as they're concerned, and it's never even occurred to them that someone would have a problem with it. When I've had boyfriends or I'm dating a man and I say, I don't want to be in a relationship with you if you use pornography, I'm always the first person who's ever said that to them, always.
And that's so depressing as well. And like, again, I feel like, pornography has an awful lot to answer for the way, I suppose, not only the way we view sex, but also the way like women feel their role is in sex. I was recently, when I was researching this episode today, I came across a Reddit thread, and the poster was asking about, like, how can I reduce my gag reflex? And majority of the comments were basically talking about the ways in which a woman can reduce like her gag reflex so she can give a better blowjob. And only one comment said, like, I can't believe that women are willing to essentially turn off a survival mechanism, which is your gag reflex, just for the sake of a man. I don't see men making threads on how to, I don't know, to be able to eat a woman out for an hour straight without getting a crick in their neck. I don't see men doing that. But women, we will literally contort ourselves into pretzels, deactivate survival mechanisms just to make it slightly more pleasurable for a porn sick man. Because, like, again, like, blowjobs are not really a thing until the 70s, especially not deep throating.
Yeah, it seems like the idea that women started to pride themselves on being able to perform all these painful or uncomfortable or, clearly pornographic fantasies for men. And, and I was always accused of being prudish for not wanting to do it. And I participated in plenty, but I always refused to, wax my entire body. It's like, men don't care about this and I don't like it. I'm not interested in looking like a prepubescent girl. And like, I did try anal sex and it was really painful, so I didn't do it again. The idea of being like, oh, I should really train myself to accept this uncomfortable, painful thing that I don't want to do and I don't get anything out of, for, to fulfill a man's fantasy that he got from pornography, when I don't even want to be dating or in a relationship with a man who watches porn. The acceptance of pornography is one of the most disturbing things to me about this culture and modern feminism, which is that women my age and younger all have completely normalized it and just tell themselves and tell their friends, which makes me really angry because I'm like, don't say this to me, don't say this to other women. Oh, it's just a fantasy, it doesn't matter. And like, it's not a fantasy. Those are real people. He's a real person. He's doing a real thing. The people in that video are, again, real person doing real sexual acts. And I don't know how you can live with yourself or be in a relationship knowing that your partner is jacking off to any pornography, but, particularly, and this is most porn, violent, degrading, abusive pornography where you don't even know what's happening on the other side of the screen. You don't know if that person is, most women in pornography are really fucked up people who have really horrific, traumatic backgrounds. That's just the way it is. And any woman who doesn't have a traumatic, horrific background who's chosen not to be in porn and can't imagine doing pornography would probably understand that. But yeah, it's really upsetting to me how women have grown up to feel like they just have to accept this.
Yep. And I think hell would freeze over before men were the ones who actually were like, hey, what can we do to make women's sex lives better? Like, I'm waiting for the day that actually happens, because look at their magazines. When have you pulled open a Sports Illustrated magazine and like someone's writing, 5 ways to make your girlfriend come? Like, that never happens. You know what I mean? You never see any kind of media, towards men that tells them to be better partners, that tells them to be better husbands, that tells them to be better lovers. Like, no, all of that stuff is like, women have to contort themselves into all of these shapes in order to be appealing to men. And like, we have to, outside of all the other like gender norms that we have to follow, I'm just going to say it. We're like the attractive ones now. Like, I can't think of the last time, like, I don't know whether COVID took away my ability to be attracted to a lot of men, but now when I see most of them, I'm just like, ugh. Because a lot of, you know what I mean? A lot of them have gotten really, really fucking grimy. They're so grimy.
It's true. I can probably count on like one hand the number of men I've found like attractive, as in like I would like go home with you or date you tomorrow, on one hand this year, and still have digits left.
I'm not interested in anyone. It's fine. Like, I'm happy and I'm like, this is nice. This is peaceful. Like, my life is good, instead of, not dealing with any stress and not waking up and having to argue.
But also, I don't know if you've noticed, but like these Coomer guys, like, I don't know what, they all have this look. You know what I mean? They are, they do.
It's like the 1,000-yard stare. Is it, they call it like the 1,000-yard stare?
I don't know. They look like a zombie. Like, it's like the zombie of bad sex or something. You know what I mean? It's not a coincidence that many of them can't even get it up. And it's like, maybe pick up a book and put down the porn for like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know.
And women date those guys too. Like, I've had girlfriends in my past who, I'm not really engaged with these kinds of people anymore, but who are like complaining that their boyfriends aren't having sex with them or that they can't come from regular sex or vanilla sex. And I'm like, what? Like, why would you be in a relationship with a man who can't get it up for you? What is the point? And like, wouldn't you just be disgusted by somebody like that? Your partner clearly has a porn addiction and now they're incapable of getting it up or coming with a regular woman, and you're putting up with this still? Like, it's so sad. And I think, what I notice about like when men hit on me here, I feel like they expect something to happen really, really quickly. Like I'll just be having a regular conversation with a guy. I mean, this is probably common to a lot of men. Men can't tell the difference between having a conversation and being flirted with, but they'll try to make out with me, or they'll put their hand on my leg, or they'll put their hand on the waist. And I'm like, I've just been talking to you for half an hour because you're sitting next to me. Like, I'm not going to make out with you. What planet are you living on? But yeah, that article that you referenced, or I referenced earlier about my man break, I broke up with someone and, he was abusive. There were other problems also. It's never just one thing, but obviously violence is a no-go. And I just decided, like I'm not doing anything with any man for at least a year, and then we'll see how it goes. And like, it's not been hard. It's like, I'm just like, ugh. Like, there's so few men that are appealing to the point of wanting to actually get involved with them. And I'm not going to just have sex with somebody or casual sex. To me, I'm like, there's no point. It's not worth it. What do I get out of that? So I have sex one time with somebody, and then maybe it's going to be weird when we run into each other in town, or maybe I'm going to accidentally fall in love with him because, which is what's happened so many times in the past when I have sex with somebody too soon, is that you get attached and then all of a sudden you have a boyfriend and you're like, wait, I didn't do this on purpose. I don't even like this person, or this person is shitty, and I ignored or missed their red flags because we were sleeping together. So there was all this oxytocin flowing to my brain, and I bonded with them before I even really knew if they were an okay or compatible person.
Agreed. I almost feel like there needs to be almost like a call to arms, like for younger girls. I get, quite uplifted by things like, radical feminism TikTok, where you see, I don't know the gender, is it people born after 2000? They Gen X or Gen Z?
Gen Z. I'm technically Gen X, so I was born in 1979, and I think that Gen X is like the cutoff is 1980 or 79, and I'm not positive what the cutoff for Gen Z is.
I think Gen Z is 95 onwards.
Okay.
Because I'm at the tail end of Gen Z. Sorry, of millennial.
And what's a millennial then? What's a millennial?
A millennial is someone who's from it's the generation right after Gen X. We're technically Gen Y. Because, Beyonce is technically an elder millennial. So that's like 1981-ish to 1995. Yeah, that would be the millennials.
Okay.
Basically, people who can remember like Y2K and 9/11, like, if you...
Okay, fair.
If you remember the millennium, you are a millennial, I presume.
I don't remember 9/11, but never mind.
Well, you're Gen Z, so that makes sense.
So Gen Z, I just feel like there needs to be almost like a public service announcement about like the woes of casual sex. And that was one of the things that FDS, we got a lot of like backlash for, because, we would say, don't sleep with a man on the first day, wait, I think it was about 90 days. Personally, I don't think, that there needs to be a timeline per se, but definitely like don't have sex with men too quickly. We will be accused of being, sex negative. Women enjoy having sex too. I'm like, yeah, I agree. But most women want good sex. And the sort of sex that you'll get on a casual night out is unlikely to be very good. And also, people just need to be more honest about what is involved in casual sex and the emotional risks as well. Because I remember when I was 18, and when you go out into the world and you start interacting with men, you want to believe that everything they're telling you is true, right? And, casual sex, especially if you start getting into that world, you will realize very quickly that there are men out there who will literally like sell their own mothers and lie under oath just to get sex. And, you know, one of the things that I'd always like try to live by also is that I feel like a lot of women also, you know, and sometimes they may not realize that they're doing it, but they attach a certain outcome to sex. And a really, really good writer from this, also called from the Baggage Reclaim podcast, so Natalie Liu, she made a really, really good comment that was almost like a light bulb, you know, moment for me in terms of uncovering, you know, just how much of a scam like the term casual sex is. So she said that the term casual sex is a complete misnomer because nobody likes to be treated casually, right? So if you get a woman and a guy on a night out, they go away for casual sex, and he decides to kick her out the minute the sex is done, technically, as people would argue, you know, you were only casual, so he's done nothing wrong. But actually, that's a really, really poor way to treat somebody, right? So in essence, you know, what you're signing up for is essentially going to be what you're getting, but you're not going to be happy with the treatment that you're getting, if that makes sense. And I just thought that is such a good point, because people don't like to be treated casually. Like, and I would never, like, in the BDSM community, I didn't end up sleeping with anybody, but, you know, let's say I was talking to a guy and, you know, we had like an online scene or something. The minute I was like, okay, fine, I'm going now, they would get really upset. And I was like, but it was just a casual, like, it was just a casual play thing. Like, I didn't want anything serious. And they would get really, really upset for some reason. And I didn't mean to break, you know, to hurt their feelings, but I was under the impression that it was just a casual thing. And they were under the impression, you know, that it was as well. That was what we'd agreed to. It would just be casual play partners, just something online that we can just have fun with. But I noticed that a lot of them, that they would get quite upset if I was just like, okay, that's fine. You've been dismissed. You're no longer my dom now. Goodbye. And I just shut my laptop.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like, who volunteers for their own dehumanization?
Who volunteers to be treated like shit? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's still on their terms because it's casual, but it's on their terms. At the end of the day, like, women don't really get that much from sex with men. Like, we don't even get orgasms. Very few of us have, you know, sexually satisfying lives with men because men are incredibly poor lovers. So, like, what are we gaining out of this equation except an STD and maybe possible trauma? You know, for a lot of them, they're going to walk away with a lot more than we will. So that the exchange is always uneven unless they actually make the effort to make sure that we're sexually fulfilled as well. And that just doesn't happen that often.
Well, and, you know, it's a lot of it is about sort of foresight, because I get, you know, I have had a lot of casual sex, and I get, like, you know, when I was younger, being in the moment and being into somebody and being turned on and wanting to hook up with them. But it really is, and this has become an unpopular thing to say, but it's like, well, think about the future and think about how you're going to feel down the line. And, you know, it's not having sex with a man right away is such a good way to test whether or not they actually give a shit, because if they don't give a shit and you don't sleep with them, then you probably won't hear from them again, and they'll move on to the next person who will have sex with them. But if you make somebody wait and you make them try and you make them take you out on dates and, yeah, make an effort and treat you well, then, I mean, first of all, you can get to know them and you can decide if you actually like them or not and if they're worthy of you. But also you can test and see if they're really going to put any energy into you. You don't want to be with somebody who doesn't give a shit if they're sleeping with you, or you could be somebody else. You don't want to be interchangeable.
Precisely.
Exactly. And I think it almost defeats the purpose of essentially, you know, what, and this is going to be quite an unpopular opinion again, but I will say it, but sex is supposed to be a bonding activity at its core, or one of the purposes besides procreation, but it's also supposed to be a bonding activity.
Well, we're built. That's what we're built for. We're built, and women in particular, we're built to bond with the men that we sleep with, and people are built to bond together so that they can stick around and have a baby together. You know, that's the point. I'm not saying that has to be the only point of having sex, but that's how we've evolved.
Yeah, and it's not an insignificant point either. And I just think it's so damaging and disingenuous when we try to tell people that, you know, that doesn't matter, or, you know, that you can just basically turn it off. Because again, the promiscuous people that I've come across, it isn't so much that they actually want to have sex with loads of people. The impression I get is that they are looking for something. and they use sex as a means to an end to get what they're looking for. So whether that is, usually if they're women, if they're looking for validation, or if it's a guy, they're looking to just, not feel alone or to feel desired, because especially nowadays, a lot of men put a lot of stock on how much casual sex they can get because they want to know that they're desired by women. And that's the way they can get it. But actually what these people are probably looking for is to feel valued. And it's easy, a man can desire you but not value you. That happens quite often as well. And I feel like women understanding the distinction between being desired and being valued by a man is also going to go a long way into them understanding the dangers of casual sex, because a lot of these men, they might desire the woman in the moment, but they don't really value her.
Yeah, and the stress of the sort of after effects of going along with casual sex and pretending or maybe feeling in the moment like, oh yeah, I'm fine with this is fine, but then being neglected or ignored, or he doesn't call you back, or he doesn't treat you with respect or value, is all that stress and all of those bad feelings worth having casual sex one night? Of course not.
But I think there's a lot of women who are in denial as well, because I meet a lot of women who are like, no, I could do it. I could, have sex without feelings and I wouldn't get attached and stuff. And I don't know, to me, it just sounds like cool. Because at the end of the day, you're a human person. You may not think that you'll be affected by it, but if you're sleeping with the same person, like consistently over a period of time, it's a bonding hormone. Like oxytocin is released. Like this is a biological reality. The more time you spend with this person, the more time that you're spending having these intimate relations with them, you're going to develop feelings at some point that you can't ignore. So you just live in this perpetual state of denial where you think like, oh yeah, no, I'm never going to develop feelings. And like, I'm totally okay with like this weird situationship where he doesn't acknowledge me and pretends like I don't exist when we're not sleeping together. And like, you're just hurting yourself at the end of it. But I meet a lot of women who are like, no, I could do it too. I could get away with it too. And I don't know if it's just like this, again, like this false empowerment thing where they just think that it sounds empowering to say that they could do it the same way a man can and like it wouldn't affect them. Like they always happen to be the women who are perpetually chasing after one guy to another. It's like a codependent thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done that, I've been in those situations. And so I've learned the hard way. Right. And so I think that's sort of why I feel like I'm trying to tell younger women, don't buy into this and don't do it, because it's just a waste of time that leads to hurt. It's torturous to go into a relationship with a man that's not really a relationship, and he can sort of pick you when he wants or discard you when he doesn't want, and he gets what he wants and then doesn't have to give you any more, and you're just feeling stressed out or worried or wanting more and never get, like, it really is emotionally torturous. And I think that if women, first of all, better understood how their own bodies worked and understood about that bonding chemical and the fact that it's completely natural and inevitable that if you sleep with the same person more than once, then you're going to start to develop feelings for them. You can't not. You're a human being. But also, you deserve to be picked and treated as valuable, specific human being that this person actually wants to be around, and not just, oh, you could be anyone, or if I feel like it right now, or if this is convenient for me. And yeah, so much of this is just a big lie that's been told to us that, yeah, we can have sex without feelings and that it's desirable to have sex without feelings. And neither of those things are true.
Agreed. And so I guess in your opinion, what would you say, I suppose, if you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give your 18-year-old self advice on how to not get caught up in hookup culture, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I mean, first of all, I think that when I was doing that, it was because I was insecure and I didn't really value myself and I didn't feel like I was worthy of that kind of effort. I don't think that I knew that at the time. But, when we talk about, like, you see a woman who's really promiscuous or like, posting thoughty photos all over Instagram or whatever, my first thought is like, oh, you're really insecure. and you probably have like trauma in your history, and you're not a very mentally healthy person. That's like sort of desperate behavior. You know, if you're a confident woman who likes yourself, I don't think you really need to be putting photos of your ass all over the internet so you can get attention from strangers. But I think I would first of all have explained to myself that you can't have casual sex and that sex isn't casual. You know, sex is not casual for women. First of all, it can be dangerous. Obviously, you can get pregnant or get an STD. But also, you know, sex is not emotionally casual. Your body is not separate from your mind. And it's worthwhile to wait a minute, even if it's, you know, I don't think that it was necessarily always about a man pressuring me to have sex. Often I wanted it too, but I don't think I really thought about the reasons why. And I think a lot of those reasons were validation, because I had gotten this message that women who had casual sex and could get a lot of guys were, you know, empowered and players or whatever. It was some form of, it felt powerful to me because I don't think I knew how to access real power at the time. And yeah, I think better understanding of our bodies and how that bonding works. And also just, you know, like waiting for something is in general a good thing. You don't need immediate gratification, and usually the things that you get via immediate gratification aren't good for you, whether that's junk food or sex or whatever, you know, drug you're taking so that you can relax if you're feeling anxiety instead of trying to work through it or whatever that is. And, you know, good things are worth the wait, including health and relationships. But you know, the consequences of casual sex are wide ranging, including just things like feeling hurt and feeling disrespected, which are really like kind of harsh and long lasting feelings for young women. And you can really avoid that by just making clear choices and by not having sex right away and forcing somebody to try and to get to know them and deciding whether or not you like them and whether or not they're a good person. And again, you know, you're not gonna catch most of those red flags when you're meeting somebody at a bar and you're both drunk. Obviously, you know, this guy could be abusive, he could be a liar, he could be a narcissist, he could be, you know, a loser. You have no idea. So, and you don't want to get caught up with somebody shitty and waste years of your life on that.
Yeah, true. And it's like guys are sometimes the nicest to you when they haven't had sex with you yet and they think there's a chance that they will have sex with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, men will do their very best early on. I mean, men, I've been in relationships with guys where I'm like, oh my God, you fully just completely lied to me early on. Like this whole story of who you are and what you do, that was full bullshit because you were trying to have sex with me. And now that I know you and I know the truth, I'm like, Jesus Christ, because I don't behave in that way. So you don't assume that other people do that. Like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know that it's good to walk around in the world thinking everyone's lying to you all the time. But, you know, when I meet somebody, I'm presenting myself as myself. I'm not inventing lies about who I am and what I do for work and, you know, what my life has been. But a lot of men do that.
And it's absolute insanity. And this is also why, like, obviously, you know, waiting to have sex, it doesn't necessarily safeguard against, you know, men like this, unfortunately, on its own, which is why we'd also recommend just, you know, generally vetting the guy. Because, again, thanks to pornography and thanks to the growing entitlement of, you know, men to women's bodies, including having sex with them, you know, the sorts of men who are just out for sex are becoming easier and easier to spot because they can never really help themselves. Like when I was online dating, it would literally be, we'd just be talking about, I don't know, I'd be having dinner and then they'd be like, oh, dick pic. And you're like, oh my God, like they literally can't help themselves. But at the same time, as we touched on, it's also about the emotional impact as well. I do feel like if you find out that a guy is a scrote and you haven't slept with him yet, it's a lot less painful than if you've slept with him and he turns out to be a scrote.
And you get a lot of pushback. you get a lot of pushback from women as well, because there's some women who are like, well, I met my boyfriend and I slept with him right away and we're still together. And it's like, okay, good for you, first of all. But like, secondly, we suggest that as a vetting strategy because it weeds away the ones that are actually sinister and malicious, or the ones that just want to sleep with you. Sure, your boyfriend, who's a very nice guy, who we definitely believe is a very nice guy, might be wink, wink.
We're all so envious of your great boyfriend.
We are. And I mean, if I'm going to play along with their logic for a minute, right? Like, if you slept with your boyfriend on the first date or the 50th date, it would have made no difference at all. Because at the end of the day, that person is a good person. So it would have made no difference to them when you gave them access to your body, right? But with a guy who's only in it for sex, the earlier you sleep with him, that's it. So if you attach to him at all, that's it for you. You know what I mean? Because if his entire objective is just getting sex from you, then the second he sleeps with you, he has nothing else to get from you. And that's it. And I've been in that position before where, like, we had like these stupid rules, like at like the 3-date rule where you're not supposed to sleep with them until the 3rd date and stuff. And I used to feel so much pressure, like when the 3rd date would come around, because I didn't want to sleep with them. But I felt like they thought that was like an expectation. So I'd have to like, swat them around like they were an annoying mosquito, like just try to like get away from them, because I just didn't want to do it. I felt like I was being pressured to do it. And like all of these messages we get from society and the media, they just infiltrate your mind, and they just give you so much pressure to perform in a way that you don't want to perform. And then you find these idiot outliers who are like, well, my boyfriend Tony, he slept with me like after a bus ride, and we've been together for like 5 years. Like, most of those people are broken up by now, but like they'll still perpetuate the dumb bullshit and try to convince you that this is a viable strategy. And it's like, no, we're not saying this in the off chance we meet someone great. We're saying this in the off chance we meet someone sinister. Why is that so hard to understand?
It's true. And then the follow-up question to that should always be, yeah, but did he make you come that first night though? The answer is probably no.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Was it the best sex you ever had?
They'll lie. They'll just say, yes, he was so amazing. Oh my God. He was the Marlon Brando of sexual dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that I was trying to relay in that piece, one of my lessons from my man break or whatever, was that, you'd be surprised at how many men you lose interest in if you wait a little. Like if you don't hook up with them right away.
You don't even have to wait very long. It's like maybe 2 weeks, some of them.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I don't like this guy. But if you hook up with him, then you bond with him, and then you end up liking somebody that you don't really like. And that can be just, it's hard to break up with somebody once you're bonded. It feels sad, and you don't want to, and you feel like there's something invested. And in worst case scenario, you're in a relationship with an abusive man, and that's incredibly dangerous. And it's hard to leave abusive situations. It's really dangerous to try to leave, and it's hard to extricate yourself. And with abusive men, so often they don't let go. Like there's a man that I was sort of accidentally involved with back in my 20s who was abusive, and I escaped from, and he still follows me around the internet and like tries to comment on my shit. Like, still, this is, oh my God, how many years, like almost 20 years later. And, these guys are crazy. And then you've got this attachment to a horrible, dangerous man. Like, think about it in those terms. Like you guys say, like, it's not about, oh, you might get a good one. It's like, no, it's so that you can weed out the bad and dangerous ones. And you're not stuck in this long, drawn out, horrible situation of trying to escape a violent man or a crazy man or, an otherwise dangerous man.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, let us know what you think about this episode and casual sex. If you would like to read more from Meghan, you can find her at Substack at meghan.murphy.ca. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry, no, meghanmurphy.ca.
.ca. So check out her Substack if you'd like to hear more from Meghan. But thank you so much for coming on, Meghan. We really, really enjoyed chatting to you about this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so great to talk with you guys. I'm so glad that we could connect. And I love what the messages that you're relaying to young women that they really, really need to hear. The hard truths are so important, and there's few places that they hear them, I think. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
And what you just said just sort of reminded me of when you said that, you weren't nice and that. I actually think that being nice as a woman is a disadvantage. I think there's a difference between being nice and being kind. Like, I am a kind person. I may not necessarily be nice, because I feel like being nice is often used as a social strategy to avoid the difficult conversations that need to be had. And case in point, the trans conversation, and case in point, the conversation we've just had around people's, sexual choices and the proliferation of casual sex. I feel like a lot more women would benefit quite a lot if they focus less on being nice and focused, more essentially on just basically saying what needs to be said, even if, people don't like it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
So yeah. Down with being nice is what I'd say. Down with being nice. Fuck being nice.
Don't do it. No, it's not an important quality.
No, it's not. There's a time and place to just be polite, and this is not one of those situations. You know what I mean? This is one of those situations where we have to fight ruthlessly for what we want, because the alternative is almost too scary to imagine.
Agreed.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thanks again. It was so great to talk with you all. It was great to meet you sort of virtually, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meghan. And thanks for listening, Queens. And for all you scroats out there, we are done with your shitty sex. So you can die mad.
Die mad.